Before we start the video, I'd like to shout out Logo.com for sponsoring this video. They have an awesome site where you can buy a bunch of in-game currency and items, including all your favorite Rocket League items. Also, make sure you use code DOLBOBS to get an easy 6% off your orders. Check out the site, there's a link in the description. But for now, enjoy the video. So with the release of the Totally Awesome Crate, and it's been a while since it came out, we've had time to assess the brand new car, which is of course the FENNEC. Now, a lot of people were excited when this came out because the FENNEC did have the OCTANE hitbox, but it didn't look like the OCTANE, it looked like a nice sort of hatchback styled car, and I honestly really enjoyed using it. I used it for a long time. Now I've gone back to the OCTANE, and I don't even know why. I just kind of made an OCTANE design and then liked it and used it. I sort of change up my cars depending on what car design I use, and it's also a really fun way to play Rocket League. So at the end of the day, no matter what decision I seem to make, fors and against for either car, at the end of the day, it's personal preference on what you want to play on that day. It really is that. But also, with them being similar hitboxes, there isn't too many major differences. So a lot of things we're going to be talking about is about trading and also design. But anyway, we will talk a bit about gameplay and some of my personal points and opinions. But let's start by talking about the different painted versions of these two cars. So you guys know what the FENNEC looks like by now. As you can see, the FENNEC actually has a really nice painted version because the entire undersurface of the car is painted, and I really like cars that do this. The first car I ever saw that did this was the Endo back in the day when the Turbo Crate came out, and honestly, from there and then on, that was my favourite car for a long time, and I did use it for a while. So yeah, that's a really nice paint finish sort of design, and you can make some really nice car designs with that, because when you have good bold colours on the painted car, you can make 3 colour combinations or when you're doing your actual car design, and I really do like that in a car. Now, looking at the OCTANE, however, there's not actually much on an OCTANE that's painted. Obviously, the painted OCTANEs are worth probably the most in the game. Well, not probably, they are worth the most in the game when it comes to bodies, but I think that really is just because most people use the OCTANEs, and also it's quite expensive to get painted OCTANEs because they only come from non-crate very rare trade-ups, which are definitely hard to get your hands on and cost a lot to buy. So obviously, painted OCTANEs I think actually look worse than a painted FENNEC in terms of how much of it is painted and the creativity behind what you can do with it. So that is my overall decision when it comes to FENNEC and OCTANE in terms of paint finishes on the actual car itself. However, we can talk about painted versions a lot more because when you look at price of painted versions, there are a lot of fors and against for either car. So looking at an OCTANE, let's just look at titanium white because obviously that is a pretty stable price and it is also the highest price, so we can compare them really well. Now looking at an OCTANE, titanium white OCTANE is literally 100 keys, 100 keys. That is an expensive car to say the least, super expensive, and honestly not many people have them. Now there are a lot of traders out there and they do have them. Now a lot of people would see this as a negative because obviously they can't get their hands on them. However, I think it's a positive because it shows that there is a lot of value behind this item, and if you do have this item, then you can definitely gain a bit of respect for it, for actually owning the item itself and putting in some dedication and hard work to get it, or just, I don't know, spending the money. But now if we look at the FENNEC, it actually goes for around 25 keys, which is much cheaper than the OCTANE. Pretty much 75 keys cheaper than the OCTANE, which you could say is there's some flaws for this, there are some against, but I'm going to talk about this. So 25 keys is a pretty high price, you know, that's what good black markets sell for. So it's definitely still a good car, and people can still see it as something that is quite an honour to have and very costly, but a lot cheaper than a white OCTANE still. Now, the for this is obviously nice and cheap compared to the OCTANE, a lot more accessible, still costly, but that means the other painted versions are definitely much cheaper than the OCTANEs. Actually, the OCTANEs are pretty cheap, but the other painted FENNECs should also be nice and cheap and a lot more accessible for people who want to make some nice car designs, and that's why I think the FENNEC is really nice for car designing, because it's not overly expensive, but it's still expensive enough to show how nice it is and prove its worth. But then also the against, you could suppose that it is cheaper than the OCTANE, so it maybe makes you a less reputable trader if you have it. Obviously the OCTANE shows a more actual physical value in terms of the white version. It is a lot more expensive, so if it's sort of that pride, sort of bragging rights you're going for, then the white OCTANE is definitely for you. But I think the FENNEC overall wins on car designing, and I think it is a very nice, affordable, to say the least, car. Now, when we look at a gameplay sort of standpoint, I'm not going to go into like some super detail about the actual physics behind either car, because at the end of the day, they have the OCTANE hitbox. That's what Psyonix came out and said. Now, I don't fully believe that they have the exact same physical hitbox, because they're not the same car. I don't think you could do that. Obviously, the FENNEC is a different style to the OCTANE, but what can I say? They probably do have the same hitbox. I mean, I don't develop games. I have no idea. But when we're looking at the FENNEC, what I want to look at mostly is the underside of the car, because it's a long flat surface, whereas with the OCTANE it's a lot more indistinguishable where the hitbox actually ends, because the underside of the OCTANE is sort of a very original shape that's original to the OCTANE itself, because let's be honest, an OCTANE is not a regular car. It is specific to Rocket League. You've never seen a car like this until you've played Rocket League. Anyway, what does that have to do with gameplay? Well, speaking of like aerials and flip resets and also wave dashes and things like that, it's a lot easier to do in a FENNEC, I think, personally. Obviously, if you use the OCTANE all the time, it's going to be easier in an OCTANE because you use that a lot. But personally, I think in a FENNEC, it's a lot easier because you can actually distinguish the flat surface of the car, and you can sort of prepare yourself and think of where that physically is going to be. So, for example, going for a flip reset, you want to get that flat surface on the ball, because obviously you want to put the wheels on the ball, but if you get the center of that flat surface to touch the ball, you're pretty much getting the flip reset, and you can go from there. So I think the FENNEC is probably better in that sense, but then the OCTANE also has a sort of sharper, more pinpointed front to it, so I think that can also seem like it's a lot easier to do things like maybe air dribbles if you want to, like tornado spin to keep it in the air and things like that, or even just pinchers. I think they're a lot easier to set up in an OCTANE just because of its physical appearance, whereas in the FENNEC it's a lot more broad at the front, so that might be a little harder to understand how you're going to pinch it. But honestly, that is sort of a very weak sort of example, and it's not specific to everyone. I just thought maybe I'd share my view, and also just kind of some ideas to throw out there, because I don't fully 100% stand behind them. Obviously, both cars I find easy to use because they're an OCTANE hitbox, and they both look really nice. So at the end of the day, both cars are really good, and we probably can't really make a final decision, but I'm going to, because you guys came here for that. But personally, I'm going to have to say the FENNEC is a better car in terms of car design and a lot of gameplay standpoints. However, the OCTANE is such a classic car, and it's been there the whole time, that I think when it comes to nostalgia and actually playing the game and remembering its classic, the very start of Rocket League, I think the OCTANE definitely still has a very strong effect on everybody in the game. But the FENNEC, man, it's new, it's fresh, and it's a really nice car to design, and that's going to be my decision. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to use the OCTANE anymore, because damn, look at my screen, that thing looks beautiful.